You guys know I like weird and interesting bicycle products, and this shifter by Diacomp might be one of the most weird and interesting shifters I have ever tested on the channel. Find out what I like and dislike about it and whether it's too weird in this video. Welcome back, Pathless Peddlers, and if you're new to the channel, if you're into the non-competitive side of cycling, the supple life, riding party pace, if you found your people, hit that subscribe button. So before I jump into this review, big thanks to the folks over at Soma for sending this shifter over for me to test. It's one of those strange bicycling oddities I've always been curious about, and they were kind enough to send it over for review. And if you haven't already, you should definitely check out the Soma Fab Store. They've got tons of interesting bike products, everything from alternative shifters to alternative handlebars to wacky stems. Really hard to find items, and it's all there in the Soma Fab Store. And big plus is if you are a Patreon supporter at the Team Supple level, yes, you do get a discount. So these Diacomp shifters are pretty interesting. Different brands have tried different designs. They're also known as wing shifters. And what they basically do is give you friction shifting a little bit closer to the brake lever. So one way to think of it is that it's like a Barcon, but a lot more conveniently placed, or it's like a Gevinal shifter, but you don't have to do all that finger yoga to sweep through the entire range. The shifters come in pairs for the rear and front derailleur. Remember those. And although they look fairly big, they're remarkably light for their size. So if you look at the shape of the shifter, you'll notice that there's a bit of a cutout to put your thumb through. The idea being as you shift and you want to get back in the hoods, you would slip your thumbs through and reposition your hands. So at first it does kind of get in the way a little bit. Again, not as transparent as like the modern day Brifter, but you can adjust and it's pretty fun and novel. Mounting the shifter is pretty straightforward. There's actually a video by Diacomp on how to do it, but basically the first thing you do is you install kind of the shifter pod onto the handlebar and then mount the shifter. So how does it work in actual use? I actually found it really intuitive and easy to shift with this shifter. The big wing shape just gives your fingers a lot of leverage. So I found it really quick and fairly effortless to shift gears, even though I paired it with the Advent X drivetrain, which has a clutch derailleur. I thought the shifting mechanism with the added kind of leverage because of the size of the lever was a good balance to the modern bike derailleur with a clutch mechanism. So absolutely no problem using it with the Advent X 10-speed new group set. So I've been riding with the shifters for the last couple of weeks and took it with me to the Go Into the Sun Road video that we just did, and it works great. It's definitely a little bit quirky, definitely takes a little bit of getting used to, but after a while it was fun and natural and intuitive. But it wasn't all puppy dogs and champagnes. There are some things to consider when you get the shifter. The shifter design has basically remained unchanged from the original time they were doing wing shifters. So what that means is that they work best with non-aero brake levers, where the brake cabling comes out of the top of the hoods and where the base of the brake lever is fairly short. So I paired the shifter to a more modern Tektro brake lever, which has the brake cable housing come under the handlebar tape. And it took a little bit of creative positioning to make this happen. It's possible, but you're gonna have to fiddle with the position. Just know that in advance. I think this shifter also works best with old school levers with a really short ramp. That way you can really tuck the shifter closer to the edge of the brake lever. With more modern levers where there's a little bit more space there for your hand, it pushes the shifter back in a less ideal position. Still works, but again, not 100% ideal. And lastly, it also seems to work best with old school road handlebars where the ramp of the handlebar is a lot longer and a lot straighter. With newer style gravel bars where there's a very short ramp and a flare, it was a little tricky lining up the shift lever, so it was still accessible from the brake hood and wouldn't run into the hood itself because of that new angled flare. And lastly, one big con would be the price. These shifters are definitely not inexpensive. I wish that they would sell just a right only, because I think it would be a great hack if you're doing a gravel bike one by and don't really have a need for the other shifters. Hopefully that would be something they could do in the future. Overall, I still think it's a pretty cool design that is super fun to use. If you've got a retro bike where you want friction shifting a little bit closer to your hands rather than going down to the bar cons, then I think this is a totally viable and interesting option. If you want to get these shifters and use it on a more modern handlebar and more modern brake lever, it will work, but it will take a little bit of patience and experimentation in setting it up. Overall, a pretty fun design. I would love to see a more modernized version of this that plays better with modern handlebars and brake levers. Maybe there's a little bit of a channel to run the brake cabling through, because it is so cool and weird looking and fun to use, and definitely a conversation starter if you are a bike nerd. And speaking of being a bike nerd, if again you want to look for interesting parts, be sure to check out the Soma Fab Store. And big thanks to Soma once again for sending this over so you can make this video about the shifter. If you guys have any other questions, leave those in the comments below. And as always, keep the supple side down.